I want to make a quick video, hopefully a quick video on this idea of projection, addiction, feeling, excited anticipation, because I still have these feelings from time to time, this dopamine rush that you have when you're getting excited for something, you're looking forward to something, and you could still feel these things even if you recognize reality. And I've gone over this point before. When you recognize reality, it's something that you're going to want to be. You're going to want to be part of the recognizing reality. Sort of like once you look at people and you say, well, I'm a Borg, but he's not a Borg, but he'd almost rather suffer the recognition of the reality that he seems to think is, or at least he seems to think he's projecting onto the world. But no, projecting onto them almost from yourself and putting your own personality traits into someone else. But regardless, like that kind of projection that people have. And they almost give themselves away by projecting an opinion on someone else and what they think, regardless of that. So like, they look at the Borg and then wonder why he doesn't want to be me. He'd rather die than be me, or he'd rather suffer the consequences of recognizing what he recognizes in me than being me. It's because that's part of the recognition. It's part of the building up of recognizing the truth and not being part of the whole piece, or at least part of the Borg. But then again, if everyone becomes part of this ideal, that wouldn't apply. But going back to the idea is because you recognize the truth and you rather be truthful, once the truth has taken a grasp on you, even though you can still experience your fantasies, and they're not tied to your philosophy anymore, you can separate the two more and you can still exist in both of them. You can bring a philosophical discussion when you're taking your rational side and you're separating it from your fantasy. You put down more on the weight. You put more weight on the philosophical side, and your fantasy goes away for a while. But you also put more weight on your philosophy or your fantasy, and you can still experience your fantasy from time to time. You'll be separated more from your fantasy and reality, but you can still experience it. But that's a good thing because you're staying more rational when you're having a discussion, so you put more weight on the philosophical, rational, reality side, and you're not letting your fantasy almost bias you and trick you and fool you into thinking a certain way, because a lot of the times when you're thinking a certain way, your fantasy and your biases are getting in the way. You don't even realize it sometimes. What you want and your biases get in the way of what you know to be true. It's sort of like wishing for a team to win. Is that a good example? Wishing for a team to win. Wishing for a team, like say, I'm just trying to think of an example where you're about separating your fantasy from your reality, and how sometimes it can fool you, and it's just your biases about you, like how you get mad at someone and you think objectively, you apply some objective standard to your anger and say it's their fault, when in reality it's just you're disagreeing with their opinion and or whatever it may be. If it's circumstances like that and disagreeing with someone. Applying your own personal biases, even though what they're saying, say the person is saying something rational, and applying your negative bias to them based on your own biases that you have, fooling you by your visceral reactions, say getting angry to something, and you're letting that affect your personal opinion, and your personal opinion gets more in the way than your actual rational standard of recognizing reality that's happening around you. So your personal biases are being cloaked inside your rationality. And that's getting in the way. It's sort of like getting mad at someone and saying they're objectively wrong, even though it's just your bias and your visceral reaction of getting mad that's getting in the way of you obviously recognizing that they're right. And it's about coming to the separation, recognizing that they're right and you're wrong, or whatever it may be, and in recognition to that, and accepting that and not letting your biases get in the way. So not letting your biases fool you into thinking that they're rational in reality, and ignoring, say, the rational thing that someone's saying, and saying the facts, and you're just saying no based on your denial. And sometimes it could be overt denial, and it can be invert denial, where you don't necessarily know because you're fooling yourself based on your own biases, your internal subconscious biases, and those are fooling you into thinking it in a certain way as opposed to recognizing reality, and your reality is based on those personal biases. It's about getting rid of those personal biases and separating those personal biases and bringing the rational things to a logical conclusion, and arguing those in a philosophical argument as opposed to bringing your fantasy into those things. So yes, this is all pretty much a physical process. Driving us is this physical process of neurology based on physical processes, and I would say a lot of the time psychological is physical reactions like anxieties, a heart. You feel it in your chest, the heart rate, the adrenaline rushing, the interaction that your brain's having with the rest of your body. That's psychology. That's the psychological, emotional feelings that you have based on visceral reactions. And sometimes you can have different feelings based on these visceral acts. Sometimes you feel it more in your body, you feel a more oomph attack when you're experiencing it more physically, as opposed to just feeling it dully emotionally and completely inside your head. Obviously, it's about this symbiotic relationship that you start feeling something emotionally. Sort of like you feel sick, and then you feel it in your mind. You feel more encumbered psychologically based on your physical state and reacting to your physical state. Say you have a full stomach and it reacts in a certain way. We're psychologically reacting to this, and it's a psychology or in the sentience, the experience of perception, the experience, the intaking of something that means more than anything. And that's exactly, it's about this force feedback and the intaking of physical processes, because it's all a physical process, but it's the psychological phenomenon based on a physical process that means something. So I was talking about the idea of projection and addiction, and obviously we're addicted. I mean, that's a pretty simple concept. We're addicted based on crude mechanisms driving us to, based on the mechanism that makes us exist is the very mechanisms that keeping us existing. We're existing because the mechanism wants us to exist, and that's exactly why we're here. Based on these mechanisms of desire driving us forward, fooling us, even though it's based on a negative deprivation leading us to a positive outcome, or some kind of relative state of betterment based on the deprivation you were experiencing about cleaning up a mess and experiencing some. You're never going to fully compensate, but you're going to compensate to a certain extent, getting as close as you can. And you can't make up for your past mistakes. You can only try to prevent further mistakes. Almost in a way, you're fooling yourself and you're saying you're going to make up for something that happened in the past. All you could do is make up for something that happened in the past, learn your lesson, and make up for something that couldn't prevent something that could have happened bad from happening in the future. So that's all you're trying to do. I got some basic notes down. I'm trying to remember another thing I was trying to say. So projection, feeling excited, so anticipation, feeling excited, getting the dopamine rush or whatever it is, looking forward to something. Obviously you can feel that, but it's very fleeting. Obviously you're looking forward to something, and then you obviously know once you satisfy that, you're going to be sick of it, moving on to something else. The thought thing, you're moving on, it's fleeting, it's in the past. Before you know it, you forget it. You only remember you forgot it. You only know you forgot it once you remember it again. And then once you remember, it's only there to be forgotten then. So once you remember something, it's there to be forgotten. And you don't remember, you know that you forgot it until you remember it again. And then once you remember it, it's there to be forgotten. Sort of like the same thing. You do something, you're here one minute, you're there the next, and that's no longer there. The context is movement. And that's the movement. That's the ethereal nature of reality inside this jump from one side to the other. It goes off a foundation, it takes away a foundation. And I think I want to talk about internal logic too, about this internal logic that we have and how it can change based on our biases and our projections, and how it can change based on recognizing reality, this internal logic that we have about how things should go, how many questions we should ask before we reach a conclusion, and how much should ask before reaching a conclusion, and or reach a conclusion, a reasonable conclusion where we become satisfied with the answer, or we want to keep asking a question to satisfy some emptiness that we have. Well, obviously it's always an emptiness. But satisfying something based on a bias that we have, or based on a realistic recognition of the facts happening around us. So, yeah, the idea of looking forward to something is a fleeting process, a fleeting concept that's happening. You look forward to something, and then you're there, you're leaving yourself open. Every time you get excited, you're leaving yourself open for a greater negative. That's why when you drink a lot of coffee or something, you get a high, you get speed, but then you're leaving yourself for more of a downer. You got to go through the downer even more. And you're going down to, you're creating more potential for going down the more excited you get, because you're creating an expectation. And a lot of the times those expectations can be false, and it can lead to a greater negative in the reaction of being disappointed or a mechanism like that. And then you're just creating more of a negative you have to go down so that you can get another positive. And like I said, it's about maintaining as much of just the satisfaction as possible. It doesn't matter how satisfying the satisfaction is. It doesn't matter where it is. There's a complacency to the idea, singular complacency when it comes to being satisfied. At least as satisfied you can be in life, but obviously applying that to death as well. The pure satisfaction, the pure complacency of death, of not existing and not being able to experience because you don't exist. But the pure complacency, it doesn't matter how you get there or how much satisfaction it takes you to get there or whatever it is. It's about maintaining as much as you can But obviously it takes away, maintaining, staying as close as possible. Okay, got to go to work today, I got to go home, and trying just to maintain that routine at that point, a redundant, mundane routine. And that's exactly the thing that we're trying our best to do, instead of feeling excited based on, okay, well, I'm going to go skydive so I can be scared out of my mind and nervous out of my mind just so I can be satisfied and just be right back to where I was in the end anyway. Be right back to where I was before I started. I even thought about the idea of that. Skydiving so I can get nervous. I get nervous only to get excited. I get excited only to go down and get right back to the whole climbing up game and the whole pulling back game. So, yeah, that's all we're doing. And I think I covered everything. I hope I covered everything. So protection, feeling excited, anticipation. It's all a physical process. When you feel and look forward to something, it's a physical process driving you to move forward. There's nothing more to the physical process than that. Looking forward to something, you look forward to something, you get it, and then you're looking forward to something else. It's about looking forward to something and not the thing that you're looking forward to actually experiencing it. Obviously, it's part of the mechanism, but it's part of the mechanism leading to the next mechanism based on the looking forward to mechanism to reach the end. Sort of like fleeting, like something's going to happen next week. Oh, but it's a week away, right? Well, it's a week away, like the fleeting thing. It's a week away, but before you know it, today is going to be yesterday, and tomorrow is going to be yesterday, and the next day is going to be yesterday, and before you know it, it's going to be there. Death's going to be there. That's why it's almost in a way trying to get yourself out of thinking about it, to cope with the mechanism, because things are fleeting, things are moving. You're going to be there. It's going to happen. It's about trying your best and mitigating the negative feelings or the negative sentient experience leading up to that, because it's going to happen. It's not about putting it off and saying it's not going to happen. It's way too far in the future. It's about maybe coming to terms with it, learning your lesson now, and taking account for it now, and then mitigating it in the future. So we're always taking responsibility, so it's best to take responsibility beforehand than to wait, and recognizing it then and earlier. And the earlier you recognize it, more than likely the better it is, and then anything, than being a surprise. And sometimes the surprise is what's needed. So as to not feel that deprivation or coming to terms with something, it just happens, and you're just the victim of it. So yeah, I don't know if I covered everything, but I think I covered enough. I don't know if I covered the exact point, but obviously it changes from now then to the idea of thinking about the videos I'm making. So I may have covered the point but not realized it. So the exact point that I feel like I should have made. So you never know. Sometimes you don't think you've covered the thing you want to cover, even though you have. I think that's all I need, and I forget things early in the video. And anyway, I think that's all I need to say. So thank you, and until next time, bye.